so we can get out of here on time. I always love standing between a whole group of people and going home on a Friday. It's a fun place to be. So, I appreciate everyone being here. It's a smaller group than last time, which is nice, so we'll get a little bit more conversation over this one. But what we're gonna be looking at is a continuation of what we started talking about back in February or March. I don't remember exactly. They're all running together now, so you were here at one point, I was here. We don't have to worry about the dates. But we started talking about those Tier 1 learning expectations. What do we see as a school that we expect of students, we expect of everybody to be working towards, understanding that our students have a lot of varied needs, and we really need to take that into consideration. But you also need to set sort of a basic groundwork of what that's going to look like. And how, if you don't have something to build from, you can't really adapt. That is much harder. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And mainly what we're going to be focusing on is student engagement and what's called opportunities to respond. Which is, again, it's a term that's been in education for some time, but it's a newish term that's starting to hear more often now. The things we're going to be talking about today, similar to last time, a lot of it is taken from PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. It's not, I'm not reading out of the manual, but there's a lot of overlap within that program that really looks at how do you set up a positive school culture, how do you set up a positive classroom culture so that students feel safe to answer questions, to grow, to learn, to make mistakes, all those things we talk about on a fairly regular basis. And basing these things in our values. As a school, we've had a lot of conversations to what our values are. So this is just sort of that reminder of all of this kind of has a base in, integrity, accountability, collaboration, and transparency. And how do we have a school environment and a classroom environment that really shows all that? And the next step of that is we build on what are our behavior expectations for the school. We talked about this last time a little bit too, is we set all of our behavior expectations for everybody. Be safe, be respectful, be responsible. Yeah. Just making sure I spelled everything right. I was really hoping this wasn't the fourth time I was doing this, and now I just noticed the typo, but not impossible. So, and again, you have to, as you're working with students in your classrooms, in your dorms, in your therapy rooms, whatever that is, especially in groups, is you're going to have to decide as a community within your area, how am I going to apply this? What are our classroom rules? What are our dorm rules that are built from this base? And keeping it positive. If you look at, again, it's just 3 bullet points here. At no point does it tell you what you can't do. It tells you what you should be doing. And how does what you're doing throughout the day and how does what students are doing throughout the day fit into that? There's a lot of words on here. You don't have to read all of it if you want to. Go nuts, I'm not stopping anybody. But this is just a little overview of what PBIS is. And it's really, the idea is to set up a framework, to set up an environment, a culture where students and staff and everyone feels safe, and we have a school environment, a school climate that is focused on learning and growth. Nothing new. These things have been called different names. There's a bunch of different programs out there that do this. PBIS being one of the more well-known ones. Different names, they all basically do the same thing. And that Tier 1 is looking at how do you decrease interfering behaviors while increasing time on task, increasing engagement, increasing learning, and spending as much time on growth as you possibly can. And again, some of this is just the research base of it. They have shown, when you have a well-designed environment, when instruction is going on, where students are highly engaged in what they're doing during a class day, during the school day rather, behaviors go down, growth goes up. You'll see later, there's a little video we'll look at. Suspensions also go down, not a huge issue here, but but that is a big indicator of students who are on task, who are engaged in learning, who feel like they're part of the environment, part of the classroom. They have less behaviors, and they are learning. When I say behaviors, those negative, what we would classify as negative or maladaptive behaviors. And so again, there is a research base for this, and we talked about this last time. If students are bored, much like all of you are right now, if students are bored, they will find ways to fill their time. If you're lucky, they're twiddling their thumbs. If you're not, there's a chair coming at you. Some days you're lucky if there's a chair, sometimes it's worse than that. See a lot of shaking hands. But I will also make the case that while one certainly is and feels more violent than the other, each one is just as bad. Because a kid who didn't sit there for 3 hours doing absolutely nothing is just as unhealthy as the kid who's throwing the chair at you. I would actually make the case that the kid throwing the chair at you is at least communicating with you. They've sent you a very clear message that I do not like what's going on right now, and I'd like you to change it. So please don't raise your hand if you feel that way now, don't throw a chair. There is a clear message there. They are communicating with you. So again, this is just building that why. Positive school culture. We're all here to learn. We're all here to support each other, and we want to be in a respectful and supportive environment. Reduce those problem behaviors and improve academic outcomes. And you're going to see the word academic a lot here. That doesn't mean just reading and math. That is everything we're doing here. That is the ECC. That is social emotional learning. That is when fill in your area of expertise. So you'll see that word academic a lot. Understand that things like PBIS were designed, not designed, they were designed around the idea of more so of a general education environment. So they say academic, they're really focused on that reading and math, but this really covers everything that we do here as an organization as a school. Bonus. Anyone know who this is? No. No, not the actor of the movie. This is a deep nerd poll. All right, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'll tell you later. You're the last group, so I can announce it later. Someone in the last group, they may have Googled it because they got it after the fact. But anyone who can get this one, you waste as much time in your childhood as I did. So, all right. So more on the why. Again. Someone Google it. What? Darkman, starring Liam Neeson, 1990 cult sci-fi superhero film made by the same guy who made Spider-Man. So you have now entered a little bit of just how much I waste my time. So. All right. Effective instruction, a well-designed classroom, a well-designed lesson is a protective factor. The research shows that kids who are engaged are less likely to be engaged in something they're not supposed to be. In understanding that we have students with clinical levels of behavior, so this is not a blanket statement that just having a good lesson is going to make everything better. But without it, that is going to, you are going to see more problems even from those students you wouldn't typically see issues with. And then, in contrast, again, try to keep it positive and understanding that the contrast of that is the less they're engaged, the more chance they have to get in trouble. So just something, something to think about. And again, looking at they have better experiences academically, they grow more, they have better outcomes in social, emotional behavior. All those things are true and have been shown pretty much across the board for all types of students. Again, we have students with much higher levels of need, so that could look very different for many of our students, but overall, it's fairly true. So again, so building on that, what are those evidence-based practices? And I'm going to be breaking, not breaking you guys up, you guys are working groups here in a few minutes. I want to acknowledge the idea and the irony that I am talking about engagement, I'm talking about moving, I'm talking about, we're going to be talking about opportunities to respond. and I've given you none of that in the last 15 minutes. That is not lost on me, but there is information I wanted to get out there first. So, active participation. Every student is involved in what's going on in class. You're using those techniques, and we're going to be doing that here in a second. Like, how do you have group discussions? How do you have pairs of students working together? How do you make sure those interactive activities involve everyone? Good conversation in the last group about communication devices, communication skills, communication. If a student doesn't have access to their communication, you've already taken them out of the lesson. Whether you intended to or not, they're not involved. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Setting clear expectations. Everyone in the room should know exactly what's going on. What do you expect to be doing? What's the time you have to do it in? And how are we going to get through this as a group? So explicit behavior expectation. And, expectations are, again, we say specific behavior expectations. It's not stop screaming at me or stop throwing chairs at me, which is important. But it's, here's what you should be spending the next 10 minutes doing. And that way, no one's walking away not understanding that. And that's true of everyone in the room. That's staff, that's the teacher, that's the paraeducators, that's the related services, that's, dorm staff, whatever that is, everyone should be playing a role within the group at that point. Visual cues doesn't work great for many of our students, but there are other ways that we do that. And then positive reinforcement, celebrating when a student does well, as much as possible ignoring the negative and redirecting them back to what they're supposed to be doing. But really making a big deal when the students are on task and you're seeing those behaviors that you want to be seeing, because that is part of the lesson as well. Again, just kind of building on that, what the engagement looks like. So there's behavioral engagement, the students are on task, but they're also feeling good about it. Your student, everybody, we want to feel good about what we're doing. And if someone, and many of our students, unfortunately, come from environments, especially students who come to us later, middle school, high school, they may have come from a place where they were the only disabled student. I'm going to guarantee that they were often forgotten unless someone was there to make the teacher really notice them. That is the unfortunate reality sometimes. And so they're not used to being a part of the group. They're not used to answering questions. I had a student years ago, Debbie will most likely remember, that I was teaching a math class to a bunch of fifth graders, and I would say, all right, everyone open your books to page 35. And then I would have to specifically tell that student, because she had spent the first 10 years of her life, someone would say, the teacher would say, everyone turn to page 35, and then 35 would magically appear in front of her. She never had to be involved in that. So it was a whole year of me explicitly telling her, okay, now it's your turn to go to page 35. So, and that extends to group activity. Some of our students will not know that they're supposed to be a part of that because no adult has then told them to do so. So how are you going to work your way out of that? You have something to think about. And again, that engagement piece shows all sorts of benefits, and the research is, regardless of other factors, students improve when this is being done effectively. I'm not going to read this to you, but these are some of those, these are some options, these are some just examples of how you can get students involved. How are you connecting your lesson to their life? Example I gave in the last session is I used to be fairly involved in state testing, like going to different reviews and having a look over things. And one of the state tests, 3 or 4 state tests ago, had all sorts of questions in a math assessment about farming, which is great. And we have plenty of farms in the state of Maryland. But where do a majority of our students come from? Baltimore. Dense urban areas. That didn't connect with them a whole lot. There was a whole unfairness and social piece to that could have thrown off many students because they had no idea what a farm, like they had no interaction with farms. Sure, they knew the concept of farms, but it's not something, so there is a, how are we going to do better than people who write state tests? Is essentially, I guess, the question I'm asking. So how are you connecting, how are you finding materials that represent your students? That, the characters, the themes, the topics, they represent our students as much as possible. And again, that explicit piece of really connecting them to it. And then those teacher-led strategies of getting everyone to respond. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a few minutes. And when I say teacher, that can mean teacher, that can be related services, that can be paraeducators. It's, again, sort of an umbrella term with that. And again, just continuing with that, having peers work together, that is an engagement. It doesn't have to be me just talking to a student. You have to get those students working together, get other people involved in it, matching them up as best you can, and then how are we going to make sure that there is some self-regulation? We want as adults to be out of the situation as much as possible. I have joked, but I sort of mean it, that I got into teaching, especially teaching special education, because ultimately the better I do my job, the less work I have to do later. Because the students are doing it themselves. Just plays my inherent laziness. I just need to work really hard in the beginning, and I can do less later because they have grown to a point where I want them to be able to do so. All right, so now you can stop listening to me for a few minutes. So we're going to do an activity. I want you guys to get in groups, 2 to 4, whatever works for you, and talk about experiences of getting students engaged. What has worked? What hasn't worked? There is a lot of learning in failure. So think about that. Brainstorm some ideas of how can you think about your students you work with. Verbal, nonverbal, all sorts of things that we have to consider, and how would you adapt this for your students? And on the right here, there's about 5 questions. You don't have to answer every one of them, but they can be guides for you. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this for about 5 minutes. And I'm going to ask for some brave volunteers to just share out a little bit of what you guys discussed. And go for it. minute or so. Sure. Thank you. All right, everybody, we're going to come back together. Anyone brave enough to share some ideas? Anyone brave enough to share a couple ideas? It's my favorite part when everyone's head goes down, most of them goes. Oh, that's more excited to listen to me. All right, let's start with that. Everyone, listen up, please.
I'll start with number one, two. Like personalized learning experiences. I was saying to you, and Sarah, male population is very strong population of students. So not only you, but say for the summer, that's fine. So the job, yeah. So personalized their experience. Say, for instance, while they may have an activity that they can verbally present to their students and show pictures, I would have to present possibly hand-in-hand signing. I would have to present actual objects, and if it's a child with some like perception or a child with PBIS, I would have to present background and things in the color that I use in the colleges.
Very good. Excellent answer. Thank you. Thank you, everyone back there. Anybody else? One more? One more brave person? That's right.
For our class now group, what stands out for me is question number 4, the area of self-regulation tools that we can empower our students with. One of our students in particular this falls under, because our environment, if it's in chaos, it makes her in chaos. If it's not structured, that means in the classroom set up structure, however, each staff structure emotionally too, because if she sees alcohol and not regulated to handle emotions, it can set the whole day into chaos. So definitely that's an area I think for behavior kids and on whole to work on the strategies of self-regulation.
Yeah, self-regulation piece is important. It's important for all of us, and that's like you bring up a great point about knowing your own emotions and how you're feeling, and that's a whole other training, which is very important, but not what we're doing today, but very important. I'm glad you brought that up. It's such an important thing. But that self-regulation piece, and giving students ways as much as they can, even what you were saying to Carla about, like, having those hands-on activities, having those manipulatives, that gives them a chance, that gives students a chance to self-regulate if they're involved in the instruction at that point too. For all students, certainly, that's great. Thank you. Anybody else? I'm not going to call it. Oh.
Question 3, peer collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we all know, or at least studies tell us, that students learn better from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So how it will help students with special needs is, we can give them tools for their toolbox, but ultimately they got to find what works best for them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like I'll just use math as a black and white. Mm-hmm. A tool that I give might not work for a student, but they might come up with their own thing that they can do to help them solve a problem. And if they share that with their peers, maybe it would help some light bulbs come off in the classroom. Because, sometimes we think we're on the right path and we're way off from where the students are thinking, because we all think differently.
Yeah. Great, no, that's an excellent answer. Yeah, having students learn from each other. One student comes up with a strategy, they work with them, they share that with others, and that really can permeate within the classroom and help everybody. It's a great answer, thank you. All right. Anybody else? I don't cut anybody off? All right. Building on the next stage of this, and this is all related, but talking about opportunities to respond, giving students the ability, the time to be as actively involved in group instruction or even one-to-one instruction as that, as is going on. Again, understanding the irony of me standing up here and talking at you this afternoon. So what is the opportunity to respond? It's pretty simple. It's asking direct academic, and when I say academic, based on whatever curriculum you're doing in that moment. It's not math, it's not just math and reading, science and social studies. It's the full breadth of what we do. With the purpose of increasing learning, again, having them involved, repetition, really asking them questions and eliciting, important academic feedback. So it's your chance to give feedback to the student. It's also your chance to assess them. Are they learning? Are they understanding the topic? Are they understanding the content? Do I need to reteach? Or is the group getting this and I don't need to spend more time on it? Yeah, when you said you made a good point. Sometimes we think we know what's going to happen and it doesn't. Some days we get lucky and students have more understanding of something than we thought. We don't have to spend another half an hour on that, then we can move on. And then boost that on cascade. So we'll show a video. Just again, kind of give an explanation that doesn't involve having to listen to me, and then we'll talk about it. It's only about 3 minutes, and then we'll talk about it when it's done.
As teachers, we know that it's important to keep students engaged. However, did you know that there is an entire body of research that supports active student engagement? Today I want to give you 4 compelling reasons why we should give students more opportunities to respond during instruction. First, research shows that when we give students opportunities to respond, they are more engaged with the content. Who doesn't want that, right? I am defining an opportunity to respond as any action by the teacher that provides a curriculum-related opportunity for students to respond in some physical manner. This can be verbal, gestural, or involve students creating something. Second, research shows that providing students with opportunities to respond at least 3 times per minute during instruction is associated with significantly lower rates of student disruption. Additionally, recent research has linked higher rates of opportunities to respond with lower rates of suspension. These are 2 powerful trends that we want more of. Third, more opportunities to respond means more opportunities to provide feedback. We can better gauge what students know and increase our opportunities to provide positive feedback. If I've designed my lesson well, students are responding frequently, experiencing success, and receiving lots of positive feedback. This creates a powerful cycle that repeats itself and improves the student-teacher relationship. The 4th reason to increase opportunities to respond is that you probably aren't using them enough. Ongoing research by Cyrus at the University of Louisville consistently shows that teachers at every level and in every content area provide OTRs at rates far below the recommended rate of 3 per minute. As teachers, we have good intentions of actively involving students in our lesson, but sometimes we just talk too much, or we don't plan on how to involve students, or we don't give students enough opportunities to engage in the content. The good news is that OTRs are simple to learn. To review, we know that providing students with high rates of opportunities to respond increases academic engagement, decreases disruptions and suspensions, provides students with feedback, and improves the quality of the student-teacher relationship. So what are some strategies for increasing opportunities to respond? Check out our next video to learn specific verbal engagement strategies.
Any reaction, any thoughts on that? Someone's excited, all right. Anything that came out of that, anything that seemed like, oh wow, that's big, or oh I didn't know that, or oh that's so cool, I didn't know that. Yes. Oh, I mean, yes. Say that louder, please.
3 times per minute.
What do you think of that? 3 times per minute is what she said. What do you think of that? That's a lot. 3 times a minute.
What kind of population is she talking about?
So, this is a research, this is college research, I mean, it's in general. So, and the question came in the last session is, like, how does that work with kids with, like, you have, like, longer processing time? And you have to adapt to that.
Right, 3 times a minute's not gonna work with a lot of kids.
It's not, no, and this is, again, and what this, and the 3 times a minute is sort of, they're looking at a large population of students. The point is not necessarily to focus for us on that 3 times a minute. It's focusing on how do you increase that as much as possible. In the last session, someone did ask the question, like, what do you do? How do you implement this for students who have like 30 seconds of processing time? That's a good point, and you have to, you know, we're not sitting there with a timer ticking it off, but how are you going to increase that as much as possible? The other thing, kind of going back to what I said before, is making sure that assessment and data really tells you that there is a processing issue. We sometimes assume there's a processing issue. Remember, some of our kids have sat in classes where no one has ever asked them a question, or very rarely has really involved them, and the only person involving them is the really nice adult sitting next to them the entire day. So, is it a processing issue, or are they just not aware that it is, they have to respond now? Is it a learned behavior, or is it a real processing issue? So that goes to knowing your students, really understanding those assessments. And we have many students here that have long processing times. I'm not denying that. Because you want to be careful that it is a processing issue, not just a learned behavior that maybe we can help teach them out of. Students who take more processing time you can't necessarily teach them out of that. You just have to integrate that into your calculation. But it is. There is a lot. I mean, it's, you know, I haven't had one group yet that hasn't more than 3. All right. So we'll just go over this a little bit too. So, what are those elements? Like, what are those evidence-based strategies around opportunities to respond? So relevance, obviously. You're asking questions out of left field that have nothing to do with what you're talking about. You're not really assessing their learning, and you're not really increasing their chances of learning. Variety and unpredictability. You can see next to avoid predictability, I have a little asterisk there, because we do have students, and there are students here, similar to the processing concerns, you know, students with learning disabilities, students with other disabilities, where having some forewarning does really well for them. That's a possible strategy for working around some of that processing time, is you give them that chance to pre-think through what they're going to answer. For many students, the predictability they're talking about is, like, I'm over here, so I'm going to ask Debbie a question, and I'm going to ask Tim a question, and, you know, I'm going to go down the line. I'm going to go down the line, so you know, like, okay, well, Debbie's on question 1, so I'm going to answer question 2, I'm going to answer question 3, and that, you know, you want to be able to catch students doing well, you want to be able to kind of keep them engaged. If they don't know exactly who's up next, that may help a little bit. But that goes to knowing your students too. If that strategy is going to get a chair thrown at you, don't do it. That's fine. Unless that's, you know, what you're looking, unless that's the situation you're looking to elicit.
I also think too, it speaks to, like, does the student really know this, or do they just know what's coming next? Like, if I'm counting to 10 and I say 7, do they really know that 8 comes next, or have they just memorized the script that we do every day?
Yeah.
So that can be taken into consideration when you're considering, like, do they really learn? Are they really learning, or are they just memorizing because it's so predictable?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Are they learning, or are they memorizing? We have students here, not a lot, we have students here who have fantastic memories. You can read something to them, they can read something, and they can repeat it back to you almost word for word. If you ask them a comprehension question, it all falls apart. So, but I think that predictability is really good. And that's part of our jobs to assess as we're going through this. Have they learned, or have they memorized? Those are 2 different things. Stimulate interest, obviously you want to keep the class engaged. You're not going to use this as punishment. This isn't, oh, this kid's head down, I'm going to call them just so I can make sure that they're, you know, in trouble now. Moving at a brisk pace, and that looks different for different students, for different classes, for different areas. Brisk is a relative term. Inclusion, you know, we want to make sure we're including all students. And again, this research coming out of a general, you know, mainly general ed environments where we have a lot of cases of students with disabilities or other at-risk students who are not given the opportunity to be involved. They've been pushed to the side in one way or another. And then assessing accuracy. I think perfect to Jen's point of, did they learn or have they memorized? And again, these are just some resources, some ideas of how you can increase opportunities to respond. The bottom bullet is a link to the IRS website, which is a site dedicated mainly to working with students with severe cognitive disabilities. So it gives some ideas on how you can integrate students with intellectual and cognitive disabilities into these sort of group or individual opportunities to respond. And everyone will have access to this. You can just click on it and I'll make sure we get it. IRIS, I-R-I-S. The IRIS Center, not IRS. IRIS Center is a research group. They really are, yeah. That's where all your tax money goes. All right. Next, and what's up here now, again, I'm not going to read this to you. This is a sort of a self-check rubric of how you can look at, and again, not getting caught up in the 3 per minute, not getting caught up in the doing nothing or doing everything. It's, how do you increase? How do you work towards that increasing those opportunities to respond, increasing that engagement as much as it's possible for the students that you're working with within the environment that you're in. It's not a matter of we're going to sit there, someone's sitting there with a timer and clicking it off and making sure that you're hitting those 3 per minute. It's how do you increase that to the best of the ability for who you're working with at that time. And how can you find those additional opportunities for yourself to build that into a lesson? All right, so we're almost done here. One more activity. We're going to do the same thing as last time. We're going to do a little group here and talk about brainstorm ways to create frequent and varied chances for students to actively participate. So verbal, nonverbal. Consider your students. Are they using AAC devices? Are they using sign language? Are they using are they using gestures? Whatever that case is. How can you help integrate those students and making sure that everyone is involved? All right. So we're going to take like 2 to 3 minutes for this. So we can finish pretty close to on time and have fun. Unless you really want to hang out with me for the weekend. You be the first. All right, anyone want to share something? Anyone want to share an idea or two they have around increasing opportunities to respond for all of our students? Or all of your students, I should say. I'm not saying you have to consider every kid in school.
Or they have cars.
Anybody? I'll call on people for that. All right. All right, everyone listen up, please.
IB's software, and the IB software is sometimes difficult for spontaneous peer conversations. So the peers knowing this child's interest will kind of come up with yes or no answers, and they will watch for the child's reaction, and when you get it right, they make a giant smile, and then you know that they're being in that spontaneous peer activity.
That's a great example, thank you. Yeah, so I know you're anyone who can hear it, student who uses an IDA system, which can be, especially as you're learning it, can be difficult for spontaneous conversation. There's a lot of moving around, and other students in the class, and teachers can kind of learn what those nonverbal reactions might look like in terms of yes or no questions to start building that conversational growth. Anybody else? Darren,
We have a student who uses the protocol on iPad and we put all the information in there. So that's very classes, when you have folders and folders and folders and folders. And so she can see everybody else.
very good. Yeah, so yeah, example of a student using Proloquo, which is a AAC app. Pretty powerful that we have some students using it. Those are all great examples. All great examples. Anybody else want to throw it out there? Ben.
Asking questions that can be answered using their AAC device. Because they, my understanding, they're limited to certain phrases. What's exciting is some of the new ones have used AI to create answers. It's still only numeric for kind of yes or no. But I look forward to seeing that expand.
Yeah. Yeah, so another good example is that as you're designing your lessons and knowing your students, if they're using AAC devices or something else, making sure that your questions can involve that. And is their software set up? Similar to what Sarah was saying before, that you guys have to throw everything in there. That's a student who may have a little bit more advanced skill in that area where you want, sometimes you have to pare that back depending on the need of the student. All right. Anybody? Oh.
I was gonna say, I mean, public schools is for different classes, but when a teacher gives a whole class answer and one person, answer the whole class and one person answers, if the student agrees, they have to sign saying like they agree, or if they don't agree, they put their hand out saying like they question it. So the teacher can see right away who in their class gets it and doesn't get it, and or they also have these flip charts where they say, yes, I understand, no, I don't understand, or yes, I agree. And so they, cite those. So it's a really quick way to get responses from everyone and everybody's included, and it's low tech phase.
Yeah, and that can work in many of our classes, obviously, not every kid can do sign language, and that's a great group activity. One student answers, but everyone gets involved, and you can take a kind of a quick look at the whole class, and are they getting it, or do I need to go over this more, or change up what I'm doing? All right, these are all great answers. Yes, you go.
And just one thing, and I'm sure there's a question on H2, and then probably three, four, but anyway, stop this to a normal level, and that's why when we do a lot of our home reading activities, we use this tablet. And okay, while they came to the room, we're going to use that, if we're talking to the device, we provide the answer, and they, kind of split. But one thing I think is cool that Karen Moore helped us set it up so that they can hit the switch to turn the pages.
Yes.
So that we can go on to the next meeting, so it still gives us the opportunity to participate by the board to the next page.
Fantastic, yes, great. So that students using switches to turn pages on a tablet board, an electronic book. So they are involved in that literacy activity just as if they were turning the page on a printer rail. All great answers, I really appreciate that. Any questions here as we're at 3:35? Sarah?
So I was thinking about the student who have very long wait time, which is a good thing. To us and to the other students in the last school, so my question is, I mean, they don't know what to do. When the one student has, and we need to give her her time.
Yeah.
We give her answers.
Yeah, and it's hard, and that, it's a matter of kind of figuring out that dynamic. What came up, and I don't necessarily have an answer for you, that, oh, you're gonna walk away and I now solve this for you. I wish I did, but that's not gonna happen. It came up with a student who has a significant wait time, about 30 seconds, and really needs that, and can give very thoughtful, great answers, but really needs that time to process and verbalize her answers at that point. And that maybe when that forewarning comes in, it's, oh, this is the question you're going to do, and we're going to be coming back to you in a few minutes. So those are ideas to think about, is give her that time, but then give the chance for other students to do different questions. And kind of going against what it said out here about that, avoiding predictability. In this case, that student needs some predictability. They need that time to process, to think, then to be able to verbalize, but that doesn't mean you have to stop the whole room for that to happen. You could still have other students answering some questions, but really what she's doing at that point is concentrating on what the question you have given her to think about. And you're going to come back to her after 30, 35 seconds, so she can really give that great answer and be involved in the class.
We have a student that processes like that as well. We did came up with creative Strand because using his writing board that put the question on and come back around to or given on paper and pencil to see if what area that worked best at that time to see how we could deliver.
That's right. So it's very similar, as I was saying, they have students with very similar processing time, and they will give him paper or pencil, or give him a board or write on it. So you can start formulating that answer. Again, the student has to be able to write for that, whatever works. But that gives him that time to be processing and working through his answer, but it's not stopping the rest of the class from doing what they're doing and moving on. All right, anybody else? These are great conversations. I really appreciate it. I definitely appreciated at 3:37 on a Friday that such thoughtful answers were coming out of everybody. So, if there's nothing else, have a good weekend. Stay dry. See you Monday. I hope.